Welcome to Real Dead.
That was the old intro, but hey, Josh, what's
Hey,
going on?
how's it going, Mike?
I'm doing all right. Of course, I am Mike, keeping it real, and this guy over here.
Is Josh the horror guy? And today we're going to be reviewing a movie which some may not think it's horror. I always considered it horror growing up. I've been watching this movie. I kind of have a long history of this movie. Mike does not. Mike was just introduced to this movie.
First time,
But
yeah.
so the movie we're talking about is The Monster Squad, and I think it's 1987. If
Yes.
I'm 1987. It is rated PG-13. It's not rated R, but it does have some things in it where you're like, okay, yeah, I can see why this is rated PG-13. They do have some blood effects, and some other different things. Some language in it. That didn't age well today, but for the time, it was that was in it. Um, but so my lineage with this movie, my history is back. I don't know when in late '80s. We probably had HBO as a. You know how they used to like give you HBO for like the weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, my mom somehow, I don't know why or how, she recorded. I think she recorded because I think it was like a longer tape where you could make it record like 6 hours. Well, on the before that was that the Trading Places with Bill or with Dan
Eddie Murphy.
Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. Yeah. So right before that, we never watched that because we wanted to watch Monster Squad, and Monster Squad was after it. So I don't know if she did it on purpose or it just ran and it recorded it. Probably that's it. But we watched this. My mom goes, "You can watch it or whatever." So, and me and my sister, we wore this tape out. We watched it. It was on just like a Kodak tape, back in the day. And me and my sister watched it every time our cousins would come over. We'd put it in. Anybody that came over, me and my sister wanted to watch Monster Squad with them. And at the time, I didn't know. This must have been like '89, Mike. So I would have been like 6, maybe '90. So I was 7. I don't know. But and my sister's 2 years younger, so she'd only been like 5. And we love this movie, man. I don't know, because it had the kids in it with the monsters. I always loved the Universal monsters since I was a kid. My favorite was the Wolfman, but I've always loved Dracula, Frankenstein, all that. And that's what's in this movie. And that's why that's one of the reasons why I really like this movie. And also a thing you always talk about. It's only like an hour and probably like 15 minutes, Mike. That's it. That's all.
It's like 80 minutes. It's really small. Hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes. It's real
yeah.
short.
And it's very short, but I feel like it does go by fast because it is so short, but they still get the story told in there that they wanted to tell, I feel like. I mean, I don't think you could really add much more to this movie. I think this is the movie. But yeah, they originally it bombed in the theater. It originally bombed in the theater, but over time, it has built up a really big cult following, which led to it being released on DVD with special features. The star of the movie, the kid that plays the main kid, who is Sean, he has that Stephen King shirt on. It says Stephen King rules or whatever. And he actually, like, in 2018 or 17, I can't remember what exactly date, but he made a whole documentary about this movie.
Huh.
Yeah, it's called Wolfman's Got Nards.
Okay.
And yeah, and so it's a whole documentary about this movie. And then so a parts of this cast, the girl that plays Phoebe, the guy that plays Rudy, and him, they travel all over to Comic Cons and do autographs and all this kinds of stuff because they have a huge fan base. They also do midnight screenings of this movie and pack out theaters, and they do question and answers, stuff like that. They were doing that. I don't know if they're still doing that now. But this movie has really grown a huge following online and a cult following before that. So I'm glad of that. I never knew none of that growing up. I thought it was every time I'd ask a friend if they'd seen it, they said no. So I always thought it was kind of like one of those secret movies that you kind of already knew about. You know what I'm talking about, Mike? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I know about this movie. And if you heard someone else say, you're like, oh my gosh, they know about Monster Squad. Like, it's like one of those type of movies. Well, it was back then in the early 90s. But yeah, I like I said, I love this movie. Mike, do you want to bring up do you have the Rotten Tomatoes or the?
I do. I don't have. It didn't really have a synopsis to it other than it's a fun '80s adventure with slightly scary twist.
Okay.
But let me add that. Let's see if we can move us down at the bottom a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, it got a 78 from the audience and a 56 from the critics. So
I could definitely see how
definitely likes it better.
Right. And I could definitely see how critics would hate it. They probably panned it at the time. But like the audience, obviously, how many reactions is that from the audience, Mike?
It's only 25 reviews from critics, but I think it says over 25,000 from the audience.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. There you go. So, yeah, that speaks volumes. 25,000 reviews and a 70. That's
and only
really
20
good.
on only 25 critics.
Yeah, definitely. So that's one of those things you kind of gotta, take with a grain of salt with that kind of thing. But Mike, what are your initial thoughts because I know you didn't really know much about it, but you've definitely, since I told you about it, you've seen other people talk about loving the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's definitely got a little, a small cult following. People love it. I mean, NECA figures has come out with the Universal monsters, and people kind of, love the whole. I personally like the Frankenstein character that was in it. It was kind of mushy with the little girl and stuff. I like that character. Dracula was a badass in it.
Yeah.
Some of the other characters, not so much, but this reminded me, you and I talked about it a little bit. You said it was kind of Goonie-ish. It did remind me of Goonie. Not exactly the same, but it was, to me, I might be one of those that don't really feel like it falls too far into the horror genre.
Sure.
It didn't scare me at all. It's a fun, campy type movie that when you watch it, don't expect to get scared. Don't, it's just a fun movie. It's
right.
an 80s fun movie, kind of like not like the Lost Boys, but kind of like Lost Boys with all the jokes and stuff, but then definitely like the Goonie-ish type things where you got these young kids all together and they're like a little club and they're trying to solve this mystery and get rid of these, these monsters. And you got German books and trying to read from Van Helsing and all this kind of stuff. So, and they're looking for an amulet. I mean, so it's
they just so happen to have a scary German guy in their neighborhood.
Yeah, just so happened. And but me and my wife watched this together. We watched it actually last weekend, and we laughed. We laughed at it. It was definitely over the top on some things, but it was worth watching.
How old were you in '87, Mike?
I was a sophomore in high school, so back then I would never have watched this movie.
Right.
I was all into the Toolbox Murderers and Halloween's.
Right. This is more for like junior high kids.
Yeah, this was the kids in this movie I think are like 11 and 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
And I was a high schooler, 16, 17 years old. So I never had seen this movie, not even seen it on TV until you talked about it. And when you said you wanted to do it as a review, I said, yeah, I've never seen it at all.
Well, the thing about it, these aren't technically the Universal monsters. Because they tried and Universal said, no,
right.
You're not using our stuff. So basically they made them different enough where they couldn't get in trouble. Like Frankenstein's bolts are up here, not in the neck. Did you notice that?
Yep.
Dracula, I mean, he's just kind of like Dracula. I mean, really, what can you do? I like Wolfman's designs. I don't design. I think you said you didn't like the look of it. I think he looks great.
I thought he was a little cheesy in my opinion. That's
why is that?
That's my opinion.
Why do you think that?
I just didn't think it had any, like, to me, like American Werewolf in London we just saw a couple weeks ago. I mean, that werewolf was realistic looking. I just didn't feel like this one looked very realistic.
This is a wolf. Listen. That is a werewolf. This is a wolf man. It's different.
Yeah, I get it, but still, I don't know. It's just me.
Okay. I still go to bat for it and say
Michelle kind of laughed at it too. She was like, "That's kind of bad." I don't know.
oh,
But
I love it, dude. When he's like, he's gonna kill your son. Ah! I love that, dude. I love it. And then he busts the shit out of that payphone. I mean, people
Yeah.
watch that today, they'd be like, what the frick is that thing?
Yep.
But yeah, and that's another thing I like about this movie. It takes me back to like, I wasn't that old in the late 80s, but I still can remember some of it. And so it's kind of a cool period piece too, where this is really 80s. I mean, dude, did you like the character of Rudy?
Yeah, I did.
He's great, dude. Rudy is great in this
Yep.
movie, dude. He's a total badass in this.
Yep.
And he's like, oh, I think he's like at least 2 years older than the rest of the cast, probably.
He reminded me of me and Michelle was watching it. We were like, oh, this is like the guy from the Bad News Bears. You know, he's like the tough guy that has the leather jacket and the cigarettes and a white shirt on, kind of like the Fonz.
Yeah,
You know,
they had like a 14-year-old kid smoking cigarettes in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they reminded me of, kind of like the kid from the Bad News Bears. But yeah, and what was funny about that was the whole time I started laughing. Michelle's like, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "You didn't get it, but you know, he's checking out one of them's sister, you know, through the window and the binoculars and taking pictures and stuff. And you don't find out till 3/4 of the way through the movie. He's like, "Is that your sister?" And he goes like, "Yes, my sister." And I was like, I'm laughing at him. She was like, "Well, that's not funny." And I'm like, I thought it was hilarious. You know, he's up there creeping on the little girl out there. But I mean, I didn't mean it to sound like that, but you know what I mean.
She's older than him. She's in high school.
She's like a high school girl.
Right. And he's probably like maybe a freshman in high school.
She was also the virgin. You remember the virgin?
Don't you love that part where they're like, they're like, you said you were a virgin, and she's like, well, Steve, but he doesn't count. And they're like, doesn't count?
Yeah, I did not count that. I mean, the whole time you had to be a virgin and say this spell or whatever it was to get rid of them. And then the whole time they're going with this girl that they think's a virgin, and then nothing's happening. They end up having to use like a little girl, like 5, 6 years old in it. But I started dying laughing because when nothing was happening, I told my wife, I said, she's not a virgin. And then she started laughing when she said, you know, "Steve, but you can't count him." And you're like, "Oh yeah, you do."
Hey, I like it. Her brother's like, "We just did the whole limbo shit, and where's the thing at?" And they're like trying to figure it out. But I kind of want to. We're diving in, but I kind of want to just talk about some key parts of this movie real quick. I like the opening of this movie, in my opinion, where they start out with Van Helsing, and he's basically doing what there's this amulet that can like open a portal between worlds. And Dracula wants it so he can open a portal up and bring in more of his army of monsters and stuff to help, you know, to take over the world. But they use the amulet to open the portal to shove that kind of stuff back into the portal, Van Helsing. And you got to have a virgin read it and stuff. And like the first thing you see in this movie is a woman, like a vampire woman, a bride of Dracula. She's like freaking feeding on a possum, and she's like, and they just blatant just shoot her right in the chest with a huge stake. I love that. I think it's a cool opening. And then those things that come out of the ground, I think it looks all right for back then. I know they didn't have a huge budget, Mike, but I think the special effects they did do are pretty decent, in my opinion. A lot of practical. And then they kind of cut to present time when there's a bunch of like them in school and stuff and all that. I do like the music in this movie. Some of it's very 80s, but I enjoy it because it's cheesy and just 80s. Like when they have that where they are basically prepping for the battle of that night, and like Rudy's making the wooden stakes and the silver bullets and all that stuff, and they have that cheesy, like upbeat 80s music. I love it.
With the keyboards flying in every once in a while.
Yeah. And I also think it's cool that these kids have a monster club. Like, I would have loved that when I was a kid. No one, no kids ever talked to me about freaking horror when I was a kid. You know what I mean? But I would have loved that they had buddies in a horror club. You know what I mean, Mike?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was...
and the clubhouse is pretty cool. I mean, it's over like a swampy area, and you got to talk about the Confederate cap, though. I mean, we got to bring.
Okay, yeah. So I'm pretty sure this takes place in like the South, maybe Texas or something, because like the cops all have like cowboy hats on, and well, not his dad though, because he's like a detective or whatever. But I love the dad in this. Dell. He's awesome in this too. But and like one of the kids his name's Eugene, he has a cute dog in this, a beagle. We grew up with beagles, so I always loved that, seeing that. But he's got a gray Confederate hat with a Confederate flag right in the middle of it, and it's just kind of off-putting. Like, wait, I mean, I guess, like, are you wearing that in the late 80s? Maybe, I don't know in the South.
It was, Josh, in all seriousness. I mean, this is just going back in history. It was a common thing to see that. I mean, you saw the northern, you saw the blue and the gray. The blue and the gray was a big deal. And I remember back in the 80s, man, they used to have commercials where you could buy the chess sets that were the blue and the gray against each other. Civil War. I mean, it was just something. It was common back then. I mean,
I never cared much about it. That's why I'd never. Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing it, and then I think the mansion that Dracula takes over is like an old Confederate mansion because it's got like a statue at the end, and it kind of looks like a Confederate soldier, don't it, Mike? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't remember what it looked like. I mean,
they pull the arm and they go down, and I think it looks like it's like Confederate era housing or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, Dracula in this is a badass. He like wants to kill these kids once he finds out what these kids are up to, because he finds out these kids have a book that he needs. Because his mom bought it at a garage sale. I don't know how that works, but it was somehow. But I love the part where Dracula is basically recruiting all the monsters that he knows of in the area to be a part. He's got the mummy, which I think the mummy looks good in my opinion.
Well, let's name all the monsters real quick, Josh.
Okay, so you got the mummy, you got Gilman, which I love the look of this Gilman. He looks legit. It looks great, and you don't see him enough. You know, you got the Wolfman, and you got Frankenstein, who may or may not actually be bad in this movie.
Got the mummy.
I like that about. I like that you don't know, because he's kind of like with the kids, and then he's not with the kids. He's still kind of listening to Dracula. Yeah. What did you think about that with Frankenstein, Mike?
I like the look of him too. I actually kind of like the look of him. And you know, with it being kind of a kids PG-13 movie, you knew there had to be some kind of heartstrings played in this movie. So it made sense once you saw, because if you go back and read the original Frankenstein or saw the original Frankenstein,
right, he kills the little girl.
Yeah, he's with the little girl. I mean, at one point he's with the little girl, and I was like, oh, they're copying that, and then they go a different direction with it.
I like it when the mummy goes in Eugene's house and the dad's like, there's no monsters in here. And then he opens up the door and like mummy's right there. And he's like, ooh, so scary. You're going to bed. And he's like, slams the door. There's actually a monster in there all the time. I thought that was cool. I love it. Oh, and there's a character in this just called Fat Kid.
Yeah. I mean, a guy who just wants to eat a Snicker bar. I mean, what's wrong with that? And
the guy that's the bully is from Wonder Years, and he was a dick in that show too. So it works out fine. I can't remember.
The older kid made him eat the Snickers bar off the ground. That was hilarious. Though.
Yeah, Rudy pulled up with his penny loafer. I think he had penny loafers on or something. Didn't he?
He's like a young Fonz. I'm telling you.
But basically, these monsters are just kind of. Oh, I do like the story of the Wolfman, because it's a guy who doesn't want to be the Wolfman. He wants to die. He wants to be locked up. But like when he turns, basically Dracula has full control over him once he's the Wolfman. And I think I've seen that in other movies too, where Dracula does have control over the Wolfman for whatever reason. I don't know why, but he wants to be locked up. He gets shot by a regular bullet. He doesn't die. But yeah, then they all come together after they prepare for this battle, and it's really cool at the end, because they're like, we have to go to this church. Oh, well, one of the most famous lines from this movie is where Fat Kid kicks the Wolfman in the nuts and says, Wolfman's got nards. And that was like the biggest line from this movie. And it is funny when he says that. Kicks him right in the nuts. Oh, how did you like the garlic pizza to the face, Mike?
That was good. I like when he stuck the pizza in his face and it started burning. I was like, Garlic. It had to be the garlic on the pizza.
Yeah, I like
Yep.
that one. They have
Yep.
some clever stuff in it, really. I mean, I'm not surprised though because Shane Black helped write this movie, and the guy has written a lot of good scripts. Lethal Weapons. He's written Iron Man 3. He's written some stinkers too. I think he wrote Kiss the Girls, which was a good one. But yeah, I just love it, and I love Rudy when they're trying to get into this church because they're like monsters hate religious stuff, so they want to go in this church. They couldn't get in it, and I like when Fat Kid's like, and Sean's like, "We're just gonna have to do it right here," and Fat Kid's like, "Oh, real religious, Sean. Why don't we just go over to Burger King?" I was laughing at that, dude. But here comes the brides of freaking Dracula, and dude, this part's horror to me, where Rudy's like, I love it when he just storms off after those, and they're like, Rudy, what are you doing? He's like, I'm in the goddamn club, aren't I? And he like takes off this wooden stake on his bow and arrow and shoots at this girl, boom, and like all this, she's like, ah, and all this blood just squirts out of her mouth. To me, that part is horror. That's like you see that in a horror movie. But and then he ends up killing the other three because he's got like the stakes that he made, and he made the silver bullet in shop class. Not sure how he pulled that off, but he did it. But yeah, I love that, and they eventually fight all the monsters. Which one did you like? They kill the mummy earlier, actually, which I kind of cool. I like how they just unraveled him. I like that.
I liked how they blew the what do you call it, Wolfman up.
Oh, yeah.
And then when he was in pieces, he came back together. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. I love that part. The dad's trying to help him too. He fights the Wolfman, gets his ass handed to him, and his son helps him. They put that stick of dynamite and blow him up. Oh, how did you like Dracula mid-transformation, dude? Like where his dad, when he shot him and he broke through the window and his dad was like, suck on this. And then it like showed Dracula mid-transformation between a bat and that.
Yeah.
I thought that was an awesome effect that we didn't get to see enough of.
Right.
Because it's only on him for quick.
Yep.
Yeah. So they end up fighting. And another line that I love is Phoebe, the young girl who has the amulet. Dracula walks over to her, grabs her right here by the face, lifts her up, and it's like staring right in her eyes. And she's like scared, but she's not crying or nothing. And then he's just like, give me the amulet, you bitch. Ah! And like his total vampire face comes out and she starts screaming. And then all of a sudden Frankenstein grabs him by the back of the neck and spins her. You don't actually know who grabs him, but somebody grabs him and like gets his attention, spins him around, and he's just like, bogus, and kicks him up. That was a good part. Did you like that part, Mike?
Yep.
Yeah, I love that part. And then, you know, they ended up getting the girl says the things, and they throw the amulet up, and the monsters all get sucked in there. And somehow Van Helsing comes out of the portal and grabs Dracula. I'm not sure how that works. I mean, I guess they're in another dimension, so maybe because it was open, that's how he was able to grab him. But and then the army comes at the very end, which I think is funny. But
they wrote a letter earlier to him.
Yeah, the Confederate kid.
Yep.
So what? I mean, is there anything?
No, I mean it's just it's a good campy movie. I mean, just if you watch it and you've never seen it, don't expect it to be hardcore horror and scare you. It's just something to have fun with.
Right, right.
Yeah, don't take it too serious.
Right. I mean, it does have some. I don't think it has parts where it really drags because it doesn't have enough time for it to drag a lot. It does have some side plots that I didn't really care for, like the mom and dad getting a divorce. Like that was played up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, and then the Holocaust thing, the scary German guy that helps him, he's actually not German at all. He's actually Jewish, that they think he's German. But there's a part in the movie that probably went over a ton of kids' heads. But they're like, man, because he's like telling them, the scary German guy is telling them about monsters and stuff. And they're like, oh, you know a lot about monsters. And he goes, come to think of it, I guess I do. And then he shuts the door, and then it scans over and you see he's got numbers on his arm for when he was in Auschwitz or whatever. And he was there when Hitler was doing. So it was kind of a cool moment for, like, if you knew that, the history, but it went over probably so many people's heads that, like, why was it in there? I don't know. But let's get to the rating, Mike.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably disappoint you a little bit. Disappoint you a little bit in my rating. I'm gonna go in between the audience score and the critic score. It's worth a watch. Don't get me wrong. It's for me, being horror, I think I'm doing exactly what I told other people not to do. Is I'm expecting something a little different, and it wasn't. I would probably give it a 6.5.
Okay.
Not not a stinker completely, but not as high as the audience with a 78. But it is worth a watch, and I would like. My son didn't watch it with us. I'd like to watch it again with him and get his thoughts on it.
Seems like he would like that because those kids are like around his age range.
Yep.
Right. I gave it a 7.5, Mike. I'm about right there with the audience. I tried to watch it like without rose-colored glasses because if I came on here, I'd just be like, oh, it's a 10. You know what I mean? Because to me, it's a 10 just because of how I grew up with it. But watching it back again.
Is that your first horror movie you probably watched, or scary comedy horror movie?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't watch anything before that. I remember, I think Chucky was like the first movie that really freaked me out. Child's Play. Probably right around
that's a serious horror movie. I mean,
right. That
back
definitely.
then, I mean,
but this was probably the first thing my parents let me watch that had like horror elements in it.
And it was still PG-13, and you were watching when you were 5, 6 years old, right?
Definite 6 or 7, something like that. But yeah, like I said, 7.5. There's really not really. I mean, there are kills in it, but mainly it's the monsters. So, but yeah. I mean, there are some
Wolfman for me.
Yeah, he's got killed. You like the blowing up part, but he didn't die then.
Right. I like the way he got blew up and then he came back together. So he really didn't die, but yeah, that's the part I like.
Yeah, I also like the part where after he shoots the Wolfman's like, "Oh God, thank you," just like thanks the guy because he wanted to die. He wanted it to be over.
Yeah, he thanked him for shooting him.
Yep, I do like that. So okay, well, we better get out of here, Mike. Because
all right. Hey, thank you guys for watching this, and tell us what you think. If you've seen the Monster Squad 1987, let us know down below. Do you think it's a horror movie, horror/comedy? And tell us your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one, Josh.
See ya.